Okay, friends, good evening. Welcome to Outlandish Talmud Stories and Outstanding Life Lessons, another fantastic episode, lesson 31 in this series. So we're going to keep going and going, and I hope you're enjoying it as much as I am. Tonight's topic is the joke that inspired a generation. This is truly an outlandish story with truly an outstanding lesson. I want to thank tonight's a very generous couple, Adele and Joel Sandberg. Thank you so much for sponsoring and dedicating tonight's class. May Hashem bless you and your beautiful family with good luck, with success, with protection, and may all of your heart's desires come to fruition in a revealed, easy, and smooth way. If you want to dedicate a class, there's a link in the video description, and that will help us continue to do what we are doing. There's also the link to the class source sheet, which you can download. It's in the video description. I hope you download that. We have a story and also an amazing teaching from the Baal Shem Tov on the source sheet. So we should get started. First, a blessing. Baruch atah Adonai melech haolam she'akol nהיה b'dvaro. Okay. That feels good. So, the joke that inspired a generation. What are we talking about? What is this joke? Who was the generation? And what was the inspiration? You know, they tell the joke about the rabbi who often when he gave his sermon, you know what happens, rabbis, when they give sermons, they can put people to sleep sometimes. You know, it's like the other joke. I'll tell the joke before the joke about the rabbi who sees this new family who comes to shul for the first time on a Shabbat. He's very excited to meet them. So by the Kiddush after, he walks over to the family. It's actually the mother there with her children, and he says, "Welcome to the community, Shalom Aleichem. So happy that you're joining us here. Tell me, what's your name?" She says, "My name is Dr. Steinberg." He says, "You're a doctor. What kind of field of medicine do you practice?" She says, "Rabbi, I'm an anesthesiologist." So Rabbi turns to her and says, "That's fantastic, Dr. Steinberg. I'm so happy to hear that. I'm sure you and I are going to get along real fine because we have a lot in common." So it happens that people fall asleep. People fall asleep during sermons. People fall asleep during board meetings, fall asleep during class sometimes. And that's the advantage of these Zoom or these online classes, because if you were here in person and you were falling asleep, it wouldn't look so good. I would let you sleep, but if you're on the screen there, I wouldn't even know if you're falling asleep. So but I'm going to try to keep you awake. So this rabbi, of the second joke, the first joke I was about to tell, was every time he used to start to open up his sermon, thank you, Nancy. So Berkowitz always sat in the front row. As soon as the rabbi would start speaking, Berkowitz would fall asleep. But he wouldn't just fall asleep, he would snore, right? But the rabbi let it be. You know, at least he's coming to synagogue. One week, the rabbi is about to get up to speak for his sermon, and he's on his way to the pulpit, and all of a sudden, Berkowitz falls asleep and starts snoring. So this time, he gets a little agitated. He runs over to Berkowitz, he shakes him on his shoulder, he says, "Berkowitz, what do you mean you've fallen asleep already? I haven't even started my sermon yet." Berkowitz turns to the rabbi and says, "Rabbi, don't worry. I trust you." So today we're going to learn a story about an episode of some sleeping students. And we're going to have an interesting privilege because we're going to enter into a classroom of one of the sages of the Talmud. And this is unique because very often we're studying the teachings and the conversations and the sayings of the sages, but we don't often get that experience of what it was like to sit in their classroom. Now think about their academies, wherever they were, whether they were the academies in Israel, in northern Israel, the Galil, in Lud, in Yavna, in Jerusalem back in the day, or are the yeshivot, whether it was the academies in Bavel, in Babylon, in Surah, Pumbedisa, Neherda, and you had these large schools, and you had many sages teaching in these schools, and some of the classes were filled with, could be hundreds or thousands of students. So but beyond just the actual teaching, where the Talmud says this rabbi said the following ruling, we don't often get a taste of what happened in that classroom, because there's a lot more going on in a classroom than just the rabbi's teachings. There's this dynamic of teacher and student, and we know from our classrooms, I'm not comparing our classrooms to the sages' classrooms in the Talmud, but what's going on among the students, and what's this relationship between teacher and student, and there's always some drama in the classroom also, as I hear from my children every single day. So today we're going to enter into the classroom of, in fact, one of the greatest rabbis of all time, who we have spoken about and taught some of his lessons quite a few times, none other than the great Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva, we're talking now approximately the 2nd century after the Common Era. We're talking the generation after the destruction of the Second Temple, who now the Yeshivat, the Sanhedrin, the sages have been expelled from Jerusalem. Many of them travel to Yavna, where there's a very famous yeshivot that have been set up. So a lot of learning and teaching is going on in Yavna, in Lod, in Bnei Brak, in northern Israel. There are all kinds of schools going on outside of Jerusalem. There's no more central life in Jerusalem or temple or anything of that sort. Rabbi Akiva is the one who, up until 40 years old, was just a simple, ignorant shepherd, and possibly descended, in fact, from a family of converts. And now Rabbi Akiva, at 40 years old, there's this Rachel, the daughter of the wealthiest man at the time, who was supposed to marry a prized rabbinic student, and in the end she falls in love with this shepherd, and her father disowns her and excommunicates her from the family, from the home, because of this. But she has faith in him, and she says, Akiva, you're going to go and study, and you're going to become one of the greatest leaders of the Jewish people. He did not believe her, but he followed her word. And in fact, as the story goes, he traveled away for 12 years. He was studying Torah. 12 years later, he returns, and he is, in fact, such a renowned teacher by that time, followed by 24,000 students. And he turns to his students and he says, my Torah, your Torah, everything we have accomplished is all because of her. So he's very grateful to her. They're a very loving couple. Rabbi Akiva is the one who taught many great teachings. He ends up being one of the 10 martyrs. He's killed al Kiddush Hashem by the Romans. The Romans capture him and comb his flesh to death. It was a gruesome death in Caesarea, in front of the crowd that the Roman emperor or the governor at the time made sure everybody was watching. A very tragic death. So that's Rabbi Akiva. And we're going to study a story now. It's not from the Talmud directly, but it's actually from a midrashic source, which is another one of the gatherings of the teachings of the sages during the time of the Talmud, but they weren't included in the Talmud corpus, but instead they were included in the midrashic literature. And this is a Medrash Rabbah, which is a famous midrashic commentary on the Torah, and it's in Bereshit, in Genesis chapter 58, portion 3. And we're now entering into Rabbi Akiva's classroom. Okay, so let's study the text. Source number 1. Rabbi Akiva was once sitting and lecturing, and his students were falling asleep. It happens. Even to Rabbi Akiva, it happens. So to arouse them, he said, hey, listen up, everybody. Why was it that Esther ruled over 127 provinces? Right? Esther is the famous Queen Esther. In just more than a week's time, we're going to be celebrating the festival of Purim, which was the miracle that Esther and Mordechai, together with God, overpowered Achashverosh, Haman, and the wicked Persians. So Esther is the queen of Achashverosh, and the Megillah opens up, and the Megillah says that Achashverosh at the time, he was the Persian emperor. He was the super king of the superpower of the world. Him, together with his wife Esther, they ruled over 127 provinces, which it could be historically their leadership was the greatest leadership in world history, meaning they had control over and rule over the largest part of the earth's continents and countries ever for a kingdom to have. And now Rabbi Akiva is asking the question, why did Esther have this unique ability or unique privilege, together with her then husband Achashverosh, to rule over 127 medinot, countries, provinces? Interesting question. No, I guess that sort of captured the attention of the students a little bit to hear such a question, and it's totally from left field, because here we're studying whatever they were studying, but it wasn't related to Purim or related to stories or to history. They were studying some deep legal text. And suddenly Rabbi Akiva throws in this question about Esther and a rulership of 127 countries. What's the answer? So he said, it's because Esther was a descendant of Sarah Imenu, Sarah the matriarch, the wife of Abraham. And she lived to what? To 127 years old when she passed away. So therefore, Esther ruled over 127 provinces. You get it? Sarah lives 127 years. Esther is a descendant of Sarah. So Esther therefore rules over 127 provinces. Great joke, huh? A joke, a teaching. I don't know what to make of it. What's the meaning of this? Now, by the way, it's very common, or it's recommended, that a rabbi or a teacher should make a joke, particularly the beginning of a lesson. The Talmud records a practice of one of the sages. He would always open up his shiur, his lesson, with a joke. And the Talmud says, the rabbis, the students, the rabbinic students, they would laugh, and then he would begin the class. And the Gemara has a whole question, how could it be? He opened up with a joke, because it seems to be belittling the reverence, the sanctity of the words of Torah. And we know that when you study Torah, it has to be sifsotav, not for smar, your lips have to be trembling, uttering the words of God, the words of our sages. We learn Torah with respect and with dignity and with awe. How could it be that you're making jokes during learning? So the Talmud answers, it depends when. There's a time for everything. Opening a class where you want to succeed in this class, you got to have an open mind. You have to have an open heart. You have to be present. You can't be distracted. You have to be eager. You have to be excited. You have to be happy. You have to be ready to receive. Well, that you got to be put in a place, because very often you may be sitting in a class or sitting in a meeting or sitting and hearing a lecture, but you're not absorbing, you're not really gaining or benefiting, or you're not even participating in this whole experience, because you are not here. You are somewhere else. You're thinking about something else. You're distracted. Your thoughts are elsewhere. You're on the phone. That's no way to participate in a class or a lecture or a meeting. If you want to really participate and learn from this whole thing and grow from this, you have to be here, you have to be present, you have to be ready to absorb and to grow and to be open. So a joke, humor, has that unique ability to diffuse a situation, to lighten the air, to make it a little more engaging, a little warmer, a little greater camaraderie among the students, between teacher and students. It sort of levels the playing field a little bit. Come with a bit of humor, and with that you can capture the hearts and the minds of people. And now that we're present, let's get serious and let's study Torah. So a joke's always a good thing. Here, Rabbi Akiva is faced with a challenge. His students are falling asleep. What does a regular teacher do when the students are falling asleep? I don't know. Throw spitballs or scream or bark or leave the room. Rabbi Akiva said, let's use a joke. Or if it's not a joke, let's use something that's a little bit lighthearted or a little bit cryptic, like a riddle. A riddle is better. So fine, that is his tactic. But the question is, what is the meaning of this riddle? Esther rules 127 provinces because Sarah lived 127 years of age, and Esther is a descendant of Sarah. What on earth does this riddle mean? First of all, a number of questions. Number one, what is the connection between ruling 127 provinces and Sarah living 127 years? That's question number one. Question number two, it's not as if Esther really ruled 127 provinces, or at least she didn't conquer these provinces and earn that kind of kingdom. She just married into it. Ahasuerus and the Persian empire and the Persian army led by him, they're the ones that took over the Babylonians and the other parts of the world, became the world power, and ruled over 127 provinces. Esther happened to be the lucky or unlucky woman who was selected by Ahasuerus to marry her. Now she becomes the queen of these 127 provinces. But to say that she ruled over them, what does that even mean? Question number three. It's true, Sarah lived for 127 years. But what's unique about that number? Meaning, what kind of control did she have over that? It's not like, did she plan her life to live 127 years? There's something magical or special about that number, which is why her descendants will also reap the benefits of that number, 127. Nobody controls when they die. It's up to God when your time is. It happens to be 127. So what kind of connection does that number have uniquely with Sarah. Next question. It's just Esther that's a descendant of Sarah. All Jewish women, all Jewish people are descendants of Abraham and Sarah. The line that goes through Isaac and Rebekah and Jacob and his 4 wives and the 12 children of the 12 tribes. What's unique about Esther, as opposed to anyone else, being a descendant of Sarah and therefore having the quality of 127 also in her life? Final question is, even if we make sense, can piece it all together, why is Rabbi Akiva choosing this teaching, this riddle, to wake up his students? I mean, this could have thought of many jokes and many other riddles. Why at this moment was this riddle? Because everything Rabbi Akiva did was precise. He wasn't a fool. He was a very wise man. So why this joke at this moment was the necessary teaching in order to arouse and wake up the students right now? What happened in that classroom there? Now, there's some interesting commentaries that those that like to play with these numbers. So it says that Esther was 75 years old at the time when she married Achashverosh. There's different opinions about what her age was, but let's say she was 75 years old, which is amazing because she was still a beautiful, young, pretty woman that attracted Achashverosh's attention over all the other girls and women in the neighborhood, in the 127 provinces. And she was 75 years old. Well, that number 75 is interesting. We know about that number. Who else was uniquely 75 at a pivotal turning point in their life? You remember? Abraham. When Abraham gets word from God, Abraham, I want you to leave your home, leave your birthplace, leave your land together with your wife Sarah, and go travel to Israel, which in many ways that was the beginning of Abraham's journey, because towards God and founding the Jewish people, because until that time he was still in the home of his father, the home of idolatry, a pagan society. He had to leave all that to be able to begin the process of giving life to the Jewish story. Abraham was 75 years old when that happened. So 75 was Abraham, 75 was Esther when she begins to rule over the 127 provinces. There's something there. Again, another connection between Esther and this time not Sarah, but Abraham. Okay. What does that mean? Then it says that Abraham, how old was Abraham when he discovered God? Right, there's many opinions. Some opinions say he was 3 years old when he discovered God. Some says he was 18 years old, when he was 40 years old. There's an opinion that says when he was 48 years old, which is probably the age when he was the most mature and discovered God in the most mature way. So he was 48 years old when he discovered God and began that monotheistic lifestyle and journey. Abraham lives in total 175 years. So if you minus 48 from 175, you get 127. So Abraham lives 127 years fully immersed in monotheism. Again, the number 127. And his wife lives 127 years old in total. And Esther, therefore, rules 127 provinces. Okay, it's all numbers. It's all interesting pieces of information. But how do we piece this all together? So I want to offer 3 answers to this question tonight. Okay? You ready? Let's do this. Answer number 1 was provided, I think, first by a great tzaddik, a great rabbi. His name was the Chidushi Harim, Rabbi Yitzchak Meir Alter, known as the first Ger Rabbi at the beginning of the 19th century, led the Ger Hasidic community. Later, others have offered this answer as well, or maybe built off his answer. What does he answer? He says, when Rabbi Akiva saw his students were falling asleep, he wanted to reprimand them. He wanted to find something that would stick it to them a little bit. For how dare you fall asleep during learning during my class? How does he do that? He says, listen to this. Esther rules 127 provinces as a result of Sarah, her ancestor, living 127 years. And what does that mean? Well, if you do the math, what does it sound like? It sounds like for every year of Sarah's life, Esther gets to rule another province. 127 years gets her 127 provinces. Now let's break that down even further. If for every year Esther gets to rule one province, then perhaps for every month of her life, Esther gets to rule another region. For every week of her life, another city. For every day of her life, Esther gets to rule another neighborhood. For every hour, another street. For every minute, a building. For every second, an entire room. Think about it. That's the way it seems like Esther's kingdom was built up, based on the timeline, the lifespan of Sarah. So 127 years reached 127 provinces, and break that down. Every month of that year was precious, and every week of that year, and every day, and every minute, and every second. Meaning, therefore, what? Rabbi Akiva tells them, you have to learn to value time. Time can achieve so much. Every second of time is valuable. Time is fleeting. Time keeps running. Time doesn't stop for anybody. Time is one of these great unifiers. Nobody gets more or less time. Nobody's time operates differently than someone else, unless you're in Albert Einstein's kind of experiment and you're experiencing time at a different speed and a different rate. But for most of us here, 2 feet on the ground on planet Earth, every second is the same second, every minute is the same minute. We're all subject to time. Nobody can beat time. Time eventually, as one of the great philosophers said, kills us all, because we run out of time eventually. And too often, only when we're running out of time in something do we start to value time. But when we feel like we have so much time to do something or to be a part of something, we don't value time that much. Rabbi Akiva is trying to teach his students, how could you sleep like that? Do you know that when you sleep out of place like that, you're wasting precious moments? Every moment of Sarah's life created another sense of rulership and kingship in Esther's kingdom. Here's a famous quote about time. Imagine there's a bank account that credits your account each morning with $86,400. It carries over no balance from day to day. Every evening, the bank deletes whatever part of the balance you failed to use during that day. What would you do? Draw out every cent, of course, each day. Each of us has such a bank. Its name is time. Every morning, it credits you 86,400 seconds. Every night, it writes off at a loss whatever of this you failed to invest to a good purpose. It carries over no balance. It allows no overdraft. Each day, it opens a new account for you. Each night, it burns the remainder of that day of that account. That's time. To realize the value of 1 year, ask a student who failed a grade. To realize the value of 1 month, ask a mother who gave birth to a premature baby. To realize the value of 1 week, ask the editor of a weekly newspaper. To realize the value of 1 hour, ask the lovers who are waiting to meet. To realize the value of 1 minute, ask a person who missed the train. To realize the value of 1 second, ask a person who just avoided an accident. To realize the value of 1 millisecond, ask the person who won a silver medal in the Olympics. And remember, time waits for no one. Yesterday is history, tomorrow is a mystery, today is a gift. That's why it's called the present. How precious is time? When we're sitting with a loved one and there's only moments left to live, we say, I wish I had so much more of this. But years ago, you had so much more of this, but what did you do with that time? How do we spend our time? I mean, there are moments that we use it in a quality way, but time management, and to be able to value it that way. They say the story about somebody, a scholar, a sage, who one day he invited many of his friends to his home. He was making a siyum, which is a party at the conclusion of learning a certain amount of Torah. We celebrate that. And he was making a siyum on the whole shaf, on the entire Talmud, thousands and thousands of pages. And it took him years to complete that. And so he invites all the friends that he can over to his house, and he recites the final passages, and they all congratulate him for concluding the entire Talmud, which is a major feat that not a lot of people fulfill in their lives. A few months later, again, he's calling all his friends. I want you to come to a siyum, another party in my house. For what, they ask? This time, what have you studied? Again, it's a siyum on concluding the entire Talmud. And the friends are all amazed or a little bit astonished. You just made this siyum a few months ago. It took you a few years to master, to accomplish, and a few months later, you're already making the same siyum. It doesn't make any sense. So they come to the party, and at the party, he explains. I know many of you don't understand what I'm doing here. Let me explain it to you. I did indeed finish the entire Talmud a second time, but let me explain this to you. A few months ago when I made a party, I was celebrating that I finishing the Talmud. How did I study it? 4 nights a week. I spent an hour studying Talmud. And this has been going on for a number of years, 4 nights a week in an organized way. And I went through the entire Talmud, and I celebrated a few months ago. But I've been learning another track of Talmud study. Many, many years ago, decades ago, I realized that there's so many small amounts of our time throughout the day that just gets wasted. Maybe I'm sitting in a doctor's office waiting in the waiting room. Maybe I'm in line, a long line at the supermarket. Maybe there's a traffic jam and I'm in the car, stuck, not moving anywhere. Maybe I'm just waiting for somebody or something. There's so much time throughout the day that could go to waste. And so I made a decision many decades ago. I'm going to use that time to study Talmud also. And that was its own track. I started from the beginning decades ago. And when I had 5 minutes spare, 9 minutes spare, 2 minutes spare, I opened up the Talmud and studied. Many decades later, tonight, I invite you here because I've finished the entire Talmud on that track. And this one is even more precious because this is the result of every spare few moments that I had throughout my day. That is the gift of time. If we would use our time in a more valuable way, we would, first of all, accomplish a lot more, but second of all, have much more meaningful, enriching lives. It's so regretful when we go through a day or a week and we look back on those moments of time that we had and they just went nowhere. They were just clicking further and further, scrolling further, but didn't go, didn't achieve, didn't gain anything. And so Rabbi Akiva is turning to his students and he's saying, you're sleeping through my class. Maybe he didn't have the chutzpah to say this, but imagine someone else would say, sleeping through Rabbi Akiva's class, it's like sleeping on the roller coaster in Disney World. Rabbi Akiva's class. If only we could have the opportunity to sit in his class and listen to his Torah and drink his words. If you're sleeping through Rabbi Akiva's class, you're sleeping through life. This is not to say that you can't sleep in life. You have to sleep in life, right? God created us, we have to sleep. Maimonides is right. We have to have 8 hours or something like that every single night. It's important to be healthy, but you have to know when to sleep and when not to sleep. And there are moments, there are occasions, there are situations where you should not be sleeping because you have to be alert. Something is going on. In Rabbi Akiva's class, you don't sleep. And that's how Rabbi Akiva reprimanded his students. 127 years, provinces for 127 years. Each moment builds another step in Esther's kingdom. So that's a very beautiful explanation. But we still have left with our questions about what is there really a connection between Sarah and between Esther and the number 127? I mean, we have to go deeper to understand this riddle, this metaphor, this teaching of Rabbi Akiva. So I want to give you another explanation that is based on a teaching from Rabbi Soloveitchik, Rabbi Yosef Ber Soloveitchik, Zichrono Livracha. He lived in the last century, 20th century, was a great rabbinic leader, especially in post-war, post-Holocaust Jewry in America. Great sage, great philosopher, great author, renowned. He gave the following teaching. Let's talk about Sarah. Sarah Imenu Amatriarch. The Torah says that when Abraham buried Sarah, he cried over her and he eulogized over her. He gave a very profound eulogy for his wife of many, many years. But the Torah does not tell us what was in that eulogy. What did he say about her? But there's a commentary that says the Torah does hint to us what the eulogy was. Where? At the beginning of the Torah portion, the Torah says, Vayiyu Chayei Sarah, and the life of Sarah was Mea Shana, 100 years, Esrim Shana, 20 years, Sheva Shanim, 7 years, Shnei Chayei Sarah, this was the years of the life of Sarah. She lived 127 years. But why does the Torah use such a strange terminology? 100 years, 20 years, 7 years. Just say 127 years. Why break it down into all these different units? So there's a commentary from Rashi, in which the Talmud brings down, which commentaries say this in fact was the eulogy that Abraham gave for Sarah. The Talmud says, Rashi explains that the reason why the Torah breaks it down into 7 and 20 and 100, each one mentioned differently, is because to tell you that when she was 20, she was like 7. And when she was 100, she was like when she was 20. Meaning, when she was 20, she was as beautiful as when she was 7. And when she was 100, she was as guilt-free and innocent as when she was 20. Meaning, so that's, normally when you're 7, you're cute, you're beautiful. Once you're 20, I mean, maybe you're beautiful, but you're not so cute. Sarah was still cute. She had that innocent, pure beauty of the child. And when you're 20, you're somewhat innocent. But when you're 100, you've been through your whole life. No, Sarah was still like a 20-year-old for her innocence. This was the eulogy of Abraham about his wife. What's the eulogy? What's the profound message right here? Rabbi Soloveitchik explains as follows. Everyone goes through many, many stages in life. From the moment you enter this world and you're a baby, you're a child, right? And you're growing up in your first few years, and you're curious, and you're happy, and you're innocent, and your eyes are open up to the world. And then you get a little older, into adolescence, into an older child, and you start to gain some more independence, and you start, self-awareness, fighting for your own turf. And then you're a little older, you're becoming a young adult, you're realizing responsibilities in the world. And then a little older, and you're realizing you have responsibilities for others. Also, you start to build a family. And then you're getting a little wiser as you get older. And then you're already becoming a grandparent. And now you have the wisdom of the years of experience and to gain wisdom from that. There are many stages in life. And throughout each stage in life, you experience the world differently. You see the world differently. You have different priorities. Everything, it takes on a new shape, a new kind of life throughout each stage. That's how everyone's lives go. Except here's the difference between some and others. For many people, as you graduate into the next stage, you often let go of the previous stage. You drop it. Then I was young, pure, and innocent. Now I'm not young, pure, and innocent, but I am older, wiser, more experienced. And as you go into the next stage, you drop the previous stage of life. It's not you anymore. You've become something else. Sarah was different. Sarah, even when she graduated to the next stage of life, she still held on to the qualities of the previous stage of life. When you're young and you're naive and you're innocent and you're curious, and then you get older, and you become burdened by life a little bit and a little realizing your responsibilities and perhaps having all of your existential questions and concerns about life. Too often, maybe when you reach that stage and you're dealing with that stage's issues and priorities and concerns, you've lost the qualities, the virtues of youth. You've lost innocence. You've lost curiosity. You've lost that energetic, carefree kind of child that you were. You're no longer carefree anymore. And then you move on to the next stage, where now you become a teenager. The teenager is a little more rebellious and challenging and non-conforming, which could be a great virtue when used right. But then you become the adult, you become more established, and maybe you lose that rebellious, non-conformist side of the teenager. Now you start to conform, and you want the same house as everybody, and you want what everybody else wants, and you're fitting into the mold of society. And then you're moving into the next stage, you're always dropping the previous stage. Sarah wasn't like that. When she grew up into the next stage, she carried with her the virtues, the values of the previous stages of life. It's like somebody once said, "Ich bin a junger Mensch in an älterer Guf." I'm a young person in an old body. They say that what the difference between being old and young has nothing to do with your years of life. You could have a 70-year-old that's much younger than a 35-year-old. Why? Because one of the main ingredients is curiosity. Wanting to learn more, wanting to see more, wanting to be more, wanting to travel more, wanting to be exposed more. Curiosity, to learn more about life, to discover the depth of my life and the universe around me. When we're young, we have that. And then we get older and possibly more settled and more accepting and maybe a little more giving up on some of those ambitions when we were youthful. Sarah never gave up on that. So Sarah's years, that was Abraham's eulogy. Her years were so much more potent, so much more fulfilled, so much more enriched, because she always, at every stage of her life, she had all the qualities of every stage of life. Now, let's get to Esther. So what is now the commonality between Sarah and Esther? There is something very interesting. The virtue of rulership or of queenship. They were both queens. What does it mean to be a queen? Who's a true queen? Who's a true king? Who's a true ruler? Talmud says, it comes from scripture, that the king and the queen are the heart of the people. You know what that means? What's required, what's expected of a king and a queen is to take their people and turn them into a nation. Whether you're a ruler of a county, a mayor, a ruler of a state, ruler of a country, ruler of a world, it's all the same thing, just on a larger scale. In a country where you have, 300 plus billion people, you may just have 300 individuals walking on the same surface, the same continent. What unites us all? Nothing. We're all very different. Every individual is very different. Different concerns, different ambitions, different lifestyles, different interests. And then talk about the country, talk about America, for example. Every state is very different. Every state's got their own issues, their own concerns, their own agendas. You have blue states, you have red states, you have purple states. Within each state, you have all kinds of mixtures. So essentially, you may argue, this is not a nation. This is just 300 million individuals sharing the same continent with each other, but everyone's on their own page. Everyone's got their own agenda. The unique skill or what's required of a king and a queen or ruler is to be able to take all this and fuse it together. Take people and neighborhoods that are so different from each other, different in their race, in their color, in their experiences, in their lifestyles, in their expectations, in their politics, and whatever it is, and say, it's okay to be different. It's okay to have these different expectations from life, but recognize that we're all part of a cause. We're part of this national unifying idea, which is the idea that our nation stands on. And when you bring that all together, that is queenship, that is rulership. That's a true leader. Esther did that for 127 provinces. You could imagine 127 provinces is much more than the United States of America. A much bigger task to take so many different kinds of people and bring them together as a nation as a whole. Esther did that. Esther knew how to take everyone's differences and bring them together. How did she know how to do that? Because Esther was the granddaughter of the descendant of Sarah. And Sarah was also a queen. Esther was a queen of space, and Sarah was a queen of time. She had such control over her life. She knew how to take all the different parts of her life, all the different aspects, the different stages of her life, and not live one at a time and drop the other, but bring them all together into a seamless whole of a beautiful life with all the qualities of a 7-year-old, of a 15-year-old, of a 20-year-old, of a 40-year-old, and of a 70-year-old, and a 127-year-old. Esther and Sarah did the same thing, one with time, one with space. You know, people go through, I had a story recently. There was two people, a boy and a girl, who were in a relationship, pretty serious one, and then for whatever reason, it broke up. This is a while back. And I had to speak to both of them now about something of that relationship. It was an important thing that I had to share with them and ask them as, we're moving forward. And I had a very interesting experience in those conversations, because when I called the first person and said, I want to talk to you about a few years ago when you were in the relationship, I want to ask you a few questions. And that person shut me off right away. They said, Rabbi, I don't want to talk about it. We don't go there. It doesn't exist. It's behind me. I've forgotten about it. It's out of bounds. We're not allowed to go there. We don't talk about it. I've forgotten about it. It's behind me. It's a different me. I've moved on. I said, okay, I respect that. No problem. We hung up the phone. I called the other person. I want to ask you a few questions and discuss that relationship a few years ago. And that person said, sure, let's talk about it. And we had a long conversation talking about it. Now, I'm not judging. And each one's got their own path of healing and path of moving forward and path of dealing with things. And I'm sure they're working with professionals as well. So we don't judge. However, there's a very interesting observation of it. One of them has dropped that part of their life and now building a new life for themselves. The other, that part of their life, even if it's over, it's not over. It's still going on. in a positive way. What they learned from it, how they grew from it, how it conditioned them, it's still part of themselves. Right now, in this moment, they're a product of this episode of 2-3 years ago. How beautiful is that? How beautiful we could take all of these experiences, the beautiful ones, the festive ones, the fortunate ones, and also the harsh, more difficult, more unfortunate, tragic ones, and learn how they all come together to build this life called me. This is who I am, a product of these things. I'm not going to deny it. I'm not going to pretend it doesn't exist. I'm going to use it to my advantage. It builds my life. It adds depth and it adds enrichment to my life so I could become a better person, live a larger life. That was Sarah and that was Esther. And that's the connection between Sarah and Esther's 127 provinces that she built together into one nation. Sarah's 127 years that she unified together into one glorious life. And that's the explanation of Rav Soloveitchik. By the way, Sarah's name used to be Sarai. Remember? Avram married Sarai. And then Hashem adds a hey to Avram to become Abraham and adds a hey to Sarai to become Sarah. What happened? What's the meaning of this? Sarai, the word Sarah means a royalty, a princess, a queen. So she had that innate ability. Sarai means my princess, my queen, which may have been an endearing way that Avram referred to her, my wife, my queen, my darling, my princess. And then Hashem says, no, she's not Sarai. She's not your queen, your princess. She's Sarah. She's a queen, the princess, the queen of the world. From her will come royalty. So she's much larger than just you, Abraham. She's the mother of all future Jewish and religious people, monotheistic people. And then later, Hashem tells Abraham, listen to these words, Malchei amim mimena yihiyu. Kings of nations will result from her. Do we ever pay attention to those words? Kings or leaders of nations will evolve from her. Did that ever happen? Did Sarah, who of Sarah's descendants, which of her daughters, granddaughters became kings of nations? We have the answer. The answer is Esther. Esther was the fulfillment of that promise that God gave Abraham about his wife Sarah. So we have this relationship between Sarah and Esther. They're both queen, they're both royalty, they both have the ability to be the heart and soul of their lives and of the people and blend it all together into one tapestry and to create something deeply rich and meaningful. The connection of Sarah and Esther. We haven't yet answered though, is what was Rabbi Akiva trying to do with this riddle? We've explained the riddle. We've explained the connection of Sarah and Esther, whether it's about the appreciating the quality of time we started off, or whether it's about appreciating the unique lifestyle and abilities of Sarah and Esther to be queens, to be rulers, to be unifiers. But what's Rabbi Akiva trying to achieve in telling this riddle to his sleeping students and that makes them wake up? What's happening over here? So now we arrive at one final explanation. This was given by the Lubavitcher Rebbe once at a Purim Farbrengen. Every year the Rebbe would host a large Farbrengen on Purim, and they were very, very famous, very renowned, because for many hours, till the wee hours of the morning, the Rebbe would sit and lecture and teach Torah, some of the deepest ideas of Torah, some of the amazing teachings came out of those evenings. You know, in our Purim parties, some people, sadly, whatever, drink, eat, finesse, waste time, fall asleep, and Purim's over. But there in 770 till 3, 4, 5 in the morning, people were glued to learning and discussing Torah and really solving the world's problems in a way. So here is a teaching that the Rebbe gave about this. And it goes like this. In the verse in the Torah, which talks about the years of the life of Sarah, we mentioned this earlier, and it was the life of Sarah was 100 years, 20 years, 7 years. Shnei Chaye Sarah, the final 3 words of the verse are, these were the years of the life of Sarah. Once you've already mentioned, this is the life of Sarah, 100 years, 20 years, 7 years, those last 3 words seem redundant. These are the years of the life of Sarah. 3 unnecessary words. So Rashi, the commentator, picks up on that, and he says there's a message happening in these 3 words. It's not only that Sarah lived 100 years, 20 years, and 7 years, a long, beautiful life of 127 years, but it's more than that. Kulon Shavin Latova. All of them were equal for good, as good years, a good life. Meaning, we all, this person lives 80 years, 90 years, 100 years, fine. And in our lives, there are all kinds of stages and phases, and better times, and more fortunate times, and less fortunate times, and all kinds of things that we go through. But the Torah adds these 3 words. These are the years of the life of Sarah, to tell you that they were all equally good. Now, question. All of Sarah's years were equally good? Come on. You and I know a little bit about Sarah, because the Torah tells us a lot about Sarah. First of all, Sarah comes from a home that's an idolatrous pagan home. And for the first number of years of her life, she had no idea about God, about monotheism, just like her husband Abraham started his life. So already a number of years of the formative years of her life are spent wasting away in idolatry. Fine. Then she meets Abraham, and they go on their journey to Israel, and they face hunger. Okay, so they've already been expelled from their homes and told to travel. They're nomads. They have no place to live. Very unsettling. And now they have this famine in Israel. So now they go down to Egypt. In Egypt, Sarah becomes abducted and taken away. She's captured by the servants of Pharaoh. Bring her to Pharaoh. Now she's a prisoner of Pharaoh. This probably happens the second time when they meet Avimelech. She's abducted by him also. Now each time she manages to get away, but she's been through her stuff. And then she lives a long life with Abraham, and she never has any children. And there's a 90-year-old woman. God tells her, you're going to have a child now. So at 90 years old, her whole reproductive system of body changes, and she starts to be fertile, and then she has a child. Wow. But then her maidservant, Hagar, who marries Avram, he has a child, and their child is Ishmael. He's not very impressed with him, so she has to ask her husband to expel Hagar and that child from the house. Avram's husband is not very happy with her. But she has her child, Yitzchak. And then finally, towards the end of her life, Yitzchak is taken, she finds out, taken by Abraham on top of the mountain to be slaughtered. And it could be for hearing that news, she passes away. She dies from hearing that shocking news. Sarah's life was anything but always good and rosy. I mean, Sarah had a lot of ups and downs. She was a very volatile life. I mean, it was full of drama, full of good things, but full of really hard challenges and experiences. What does it mean, as the commentaries say, that all of her years were equally good? Shavin l'tova. So there's another way of explaining these words. When Rashi says, Kulan shavin l'tova, they were all equally good. No, they were not all equally good, as we have seen. But they were all equal about one thing. And that one thing is goodness. Kulan shavin, they were all equal. All 127 years, with all of the experiences in those years, with all of the highs and the lows and the ups and the downs and the turmoil and the fears, and yet with all the blessings as well, they all were permeated. They all were filled with one quality in an equal way, and that was the value of tova, of goodness, of true goodness. What does that mean? That means Sarah, together with her husband Abraham, lived for one purpose. Their lives were, as we would use terminology today, their lives were mission-driven. Today we talk about lives or companies, whether you are or you're not mission-driven. And mission-driven means that there's something at the core of your business, or the core of your life, or the core of your soul, that is the singular quest of who you are and what you do. And everything in your life, and every experience, and every encounter, and every bump in the road, and every blessing, all needs to be shaped around this one singular cause. What is that mission? What is that quest? Sarah and Avram had one agenda in life. Their agenda was discovering God and truth, and sharing and teaching God and truth with others, building the monotheistic nation, and living that life by example, serving God and fulfilling their purpose here in this world. That's it. That's all they lived for. That's all they breathed for every single day of their life. In the better moments, in the more fortunate moments, in the harsher moments, in the more tragic moments, it did not matter. Everything was about the mission. Everything shaped the mission in its unique way. All right, take for example, we know people. A lot of people are very moody, right? You meet someone and they've won the lottery, they got a job, they got a big bonus. Woo! They're all over the moon. It's good to be with them, right? They're fun, they're enjoyable. You meet somebody that lost their job or they had this unfortunate circumstance. Oh, you don't want to get within 10 feet of them or within 10 miles of them because there's so much negativity and thorns coming out of them. So many of us are affected each moment of the day by different things, and we become different people all the time. But there are some people, you meet them in their highest moments, you meet them in their lowest moments, they're the same. Not the same because they're emotionless, emotionally handicapped people. I don't know. That's not why. They are experiencing what they're going through. They're having highs and lows. But they are who they are. And they have a unique identity. And the identity isn't changed because of the great fortune in life, and it's not changed by the great tragedy in life. Their identity is still the same. They have their eyes on the prize, their eyes on the goal. They know who they are, what they live for, what they're all about, and what they're destined to be. And all of the circumstances in life, for good or for bad, are part of that story. I want to study with you a source number 2. It's from the Baal Shem Tov. There's a book called the Tzavas HaRivash, which means, Tzava means a will, and the Rivash stands for Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov, the will of the Baal Shem Tov. This wasn't a will that he wrote before he passed away, but this was a gathering of his teachings that was compiled by his students. This is number 2 out of hundreds, and I think this is one of my favorites, one of the most important ones of life. I mean, if you studied this every single day, you'd be in a good place. Listen what the Baal Shem Tov explained. There's a verse in Psalms and Tehillim that says, Shiviti Hashem lenegdi tamid, which means I have set God before me at all times. Some synagogues have that at the front by the Aron HaKodesh. It's a famous line. I set God in front of me all the time. So Shiviti means I have placed God. But the Baal Shem Tov explains, the word Shiviti comes from another Hebrew word, from the word Hishtavut. Hishtavut, Shaveh. It means to be equal, or as we call it, equanimity. What's equanimity in life? Such a powerful idea. No matter what happens, whether people praise or shame you, and so too with anything else, it's all the same to you. This applies likewise to any food. It's all the same to you, whether you eat delicacies or other things. For with this perspective, the Yetzer Hara is entirely removed from you. Whatever may happen, say that it comes from God, blessed be He, and if it is proper in His eyes, then it's proper for me. Your motives are all together for the sake of heaven. As for yourself, nothing makes a difference. This sense of equanimity is a very high level, says the Baal Shem Tov. Equanimity, such a powerful idea. The delicious food, not such good food. A good night's sleep, not such a good night's sleep. Clothing I'm proud of, I enjoy. Clothing I don't like. I couldn't get what I wanted. I didn't get what I wanted. Having a better day, not such a good day. A blessing came to me. We made some money today. We lost some money today. It doesn't make a difference. What does it mean it doesn't make a difference? Of course it makes a difference. It changes everything about your life. No, it changes a lot about your life, except for one thing. It doesn't change you. You, your cause, your mission, your purpose, your core. And if you had a true identity, this is who I am, this is what I'm here for, this is what I believe in, this is what I wake up for in the morning. It would not matter if you were waking up in the most fortunate of palaces, of vacations, wherever, or chas v'shalom, as a prisoner somewhere, as a captive. How is it that people in the lowest of times, held captive in terrible situations, hang in there strong? Equanimity. Doesn't matter what happens to me. If this is God's plan, so be it. There's a story about a great chassid who passed away about 25 years ago. His name was Reb Mendel Futerfas. Reb Mendel Futerfas was from Russia, and Chabad chassid with a lot of self-sacrifice. He went through a very harsh time. His family managed to leave Russia, but he got stuck behind. He didn't see his family for 20 years. He spent 10 years in the Russian gulag as a prisoner. He went through a difficult time. Later, in the 60s, he managed to get out, reunite with his family. They lived in England and they lived in Israel. Very special person. How did he survive in prison for 10 years in a Russian gulag? So he says he applied one of the Baal Shem Tov's teachings. The Baal Shem Tov taught that every moment and every encounter in life is a lesson for you, is a lesson being sent from God. Something happens to you, someone says something to you, you saw something, there's a lesson in that. Live that way, and it'll open your eyes to every experience where you're in, no matter where you are in life. So he used to talk a lot to different people, and the Russians were pulling together and arresting all kinds of people, different talents, different fields. The Russians were afraid of everybody, anyone that's resisting Mother Russia. So there was one particular person in his camp who claimed that before he was imprisoned, he was a tightrope walker. That was his skill. And he would talk about how he would tie this rope on two very high poles at circuses and shows, and he would do this. And no one was really sure to believe him, not to believe him. The way he spoke about it, he was so proud of himself. Anyhow, one day in 1953, when Stalin died, so there was a major celebration here in the camp, like a circus, a celebration. Stalin has died. And on that circus day in the camp, everyone who had a talent, who had a gift, performed something, finally had a chance to release themselves. Well, it was a tightrope walker's chance to actually walk the walk. In fact, he's going to do that. He gets a hold of a large, long rope. He ties one end to this tree, one end to that tree, make sure it's tight. Everyone's watching how he sets the whole thing up. It's time. He gets up on there. And Reb Mendel is very curious. He's been hearing about it. He's been talking to this person. He wants to see what it's all about. The person steps onto the rope. I think once or twice, a few times, he starts to walk and then he falls, gets back up. He's a little rusty. Eventually, he's walking. He's making his way slowly across to the other side. Everyone's watching. Everyone's clapping. It's unbelievable. He gets to the other side, then he turns around. And he manages to walk all the way back. Then he jumps down. And everybody cheers him on. He truly is a tightrope walker. He runs over to Reb Mendel, his good friend, and he says, "No, how was that?" Mendel says, "That was fantastic. It's real. You're really good at what you do. Tell me, how did you do it?" The tightrope walker answered him, there's only one key ingredient to make it work. You know what that is? Always, 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 every single second without being distracted, keep your eyes on the goal. If your eyes are fixed, locked on the goal, you make it there. That's how you hold the balance. That's how you do it. And in fact, what's the most difficult moment? What's the most difficult part of the whole show? Turning around. Because when you turn around, your eyes are not fixed anywhere. There's no goal. You've got to turn around to fix it. That moment is the hardest, to hold on to your balance. But you turn around and you fix your eyes once again on the next goal, make it work. Mendel thanked me for that explanation. And he said, "Well, I'm not planning to become a tightrope walker, but that's the story of life. If your eyes are fixed on who you are and who you need to be, you hold your balance no matter the situation, no matter the winds, the storms, the noise, the background, the distractions, the difficulties, the challenges. It does not matter. You got your eyes focused where you need to be. This is the equanimity that Baal Shem Tov spoke about. That was Sarah. Kulan Shabil Tova. Every moment of Sarah's life was equal, meaning filled with the same meaning and purpose of her mission here in this world. And the same goes with Esther. Esther also has a strange story. She loses her parents at a young age, and then she's raised by Mordechai. And a young Jewish girl's dream is to finally find a husband, build a beautiful Jewish family, live a good, simple, quiet, safe life. Esther is plucked out of that life and becomes the queen for Achashverosh, the queen of the most powerful king of the universe probably ever in history. And he wasn't just that, he was not a very stable guy. He was some kind of maniac. I mean, he had his own previous wife killed just for not obeying him. He was not a stable guy, not a comfortable guy you want to be around anywhere close. And she has to be his husband, and she is welcome, she's not welcome, she doesn't know where she holds with him, and she's away from her own people, and now she's married into an empire that is now, together with the rise of Haman, is threatening to destroy her own people. She's stuck in this, she's his wife, which is also a Jewish person. Esther lives a strange life. Having lost her family, lost her parents, having been thrown into all this, like, no one would want to be there. It would make sense. It could make sense. Esther would give up. Sorry, what do you want from me? I'm sitting here. I'm a queen of Achashverosh. My hands are tied. What can I do? You, Mordechai, you go figure it out. What can I do? Esther, her life also was all equal with the same value of goodness. Esther knew. She knew who she is and what she needs to do. She was raised well by her parents and related by Mordechai. Esther knew it doesn't matter how crazy her situation, how crazy her life is. It's an opportunity. It's a calling. And she met her calling. And she walks into Achashverosh, risking her life to save her people. And with that power, she actually manages to rally up the entire nation. Similar to the previous explanation. Jews of all kinds, of all stripes. Jews throughout all the 127 provinces. And Jews have many different opinions. And Jews don't get along about anything. But she says, gather all the Jews, make them focus, make them realize what it's all about. We need to pray to God. We need to realize, be proud of who we are. We need to fight this war. And they came for 3 days, and everyone, without exception, agreed to fast, to pray for her as she went into Achashverosh's room to ask for mercy for her people. Esther had the same kind of life as Sarah did. There were many great women in Jewish history. The first recorded woman in Jewish history is Sarah. The last recorded woman in the Bible, in biblical Jewish history, is Esther. There are many women in between. There's Miriam, there's Rachel, Leah, Yael, Devorah, many great heroes. The first and the last of the Bible, Esther and Sarah, teach us this unbelievable idea of how to live a life of meaning, a life of focus, a life where you piece it all together with all the explanations we gave tonight. But this is what Rabbi Akiva is telling his students. Now we understand how he's trying to wake them up. Listen to this, and with this we end. Rabbi Akiva's students were sleeping. What do you mean they were sleeping? It may not mean just they were physically sleeping. They were spiritually sleeping. Remember that they're just living in recent memory of the destruction of the temple, which was the greatest Holocaust at that time, where not only the temple was destroyed, not only was Jewish sovereignty destroyed, but millions of lives were butchered. And the Jews seemed to have no future anymore. Yes, the Torah was saved. The Torah moved to Yavne and other schools, and they regathered themselves, picked up the pieces, and continued learning. But on everyone's mind, especially the young students growing up, what future is there? We should get married. We should have children. For what? What's going to be Judaism in the next 10 years, 50 years, 100 years? Who even knows? So much doubt, so much hopelessness probably filled their hearts and their souls. The students were sleeping. Rabbi Akiva saw the students were feeling hopeless. They were feeling like, this is not what God, this is not the story we thought it's all about. This is not what our ancestors had during the times of the temple. A bit like the generation after the Holocaust, or the survivors of the Holocaust. And so this spiritual sleep falls over them. One where they're disengaged, they're possibly giving up, and they're disconnected. Rabbi Akiva wants to wake them up. So he chooses Sarah and he chooses Esther. And he says, the riddle 127, but the point, learn from Sarah and Esther. Kulan shavim l'tova, a life of equanimity. We have had glorious times and we have tragic times. And it does not matter. Meaning, not that we dismiss the pain or the joy, but it doesn't matter because it's all meant to be. And it's all part of who we are. And it all shapes us. And this is the life we have. This is the life that God gives us. And we storm forward. We march forward with that confidence, with that conviction, with that faith. It's all okay. It'll all be okay. No matter what happens, it's my story. I'm going to own it. And I'm going to grow from it, learn from it, and maximize every single opportunity. And with that message, he wakes up his students. And it worked. Because Rabbi Akiva's students were also of the greatest of our sages in the Talmud. And what they contributed and what they brought to Jewish life, today you and I are still learning, are still benefiting, are still being enriched by the heroism of their lives, their teachings, and their dedication. So my friends, Sarah, Esther, such beautiful ideas and teachings about time management, about using every experience in life to enrich our lives, about approaching every experience of life with the equanimity, with the balance, with the faith of realizing this is how it's meant to be by God, allowing that to strengthen you, to empower you. In fact, this riddle of Rabbi Akiva is one that we can all take a lesson from. Thank you for joining us and have a wonderful night. God bless you. Thank you, Gary.